So, so this is the standard theory which you have studied of labor markets, which was rejected by Keynes and then reinstated, because basically Samuelson and Hicks, they sterilized Keynes. They created a model which was took out all of the dangerous aspects of Keynes, and they had a model in which you can have an unemployment equilibrium due to a shortfall in demand, but this was an artificial model and it was not the model of Keynes, and so ultimately later it was attacked successfully and replaced by the Chicago School model. So this model is standard that you have already studied. There is the supply of labor, which is the upward curve. The higher the real wage, the more labor is offered, and the demand of labor, and then there is an equilibrium. Now, if this theory is correct, then a consequence is that, so this is what one of the steps that, okay, you have a model, now you should match it with reality. You should look at your computer simulated model, you look at the real world behavior and see if there is a match between the two of them. So, according to the standard theory, there can be no involuntary unemployment. If in equilibrium, if somebody is unemployed, anybody who wants to work, you see, if you look at the supply curve of labor, the people who are unemployed are those who are demanding more wage than the going wage. So they are unemployed because they do not have, they do not wish to work at the going wage. So this is what is called voluntary unemployment. That they are unemployed, but they are not unemployed because there are no jobs. They are unemployed because they do not want to accept the going wage. So Keynes explicitly writes, and I have quoted it in the previous lectures, that the unemployment cannot be explained by saying that people did not want to work at the going wage. People wanted jobs at the going wage rate, at even less than the going wage rate. And if you look at the world around you, which you have not been taught how to do in the economics courses, you can see clearly among your relatives and friends, people who want to work at the going wage, who would be willing to accept a job at half the going wage, but there are no jobs. Now this is in conflict with the theory of supply and demand. It says, supply and demand says that if somebody wants to work at $1 less than the going wage, there will be a job for him. So, now, of course, there are some explanations. In fact, all of the Chicago School, this is what all the time they spent doing, because basically, you see, as I explained in the earlier lecture, the Keynesian theory, which supports laborers, is very harmful to the capitalists, because basically it gives, see, this is one of the insights from Karl Polanyi, who's one of the deepest thinkers about capitalism. So he says basically, you see, the labor market is a very cruel invention. It is basically partial slavery. You sell your time, which is actually your life, in return for money, and nobody will do this except in desperate circumstances. And he says that the labor market was created by a civil war in the USA, in which, after which, basically for reasons, complicated historical reasons, the aristocrats got to make a massive land grab, the first privatization in history, and they basically put up enclosures in very large, and previously this land had been called the commons, and that's where the commons problem, so-called, comes from. Part of it, the commons problem, is a propaganda. People lived on the commons, and they could buy, if you remember Robin Hood, he's getting deer from the king's forest. So basically the people used to live from hunting in the jungles and fishing in the streams and having little plots of lands in the wild. And as long as they had this means of subsistence living, they would never accept the idea that, okay, you work from day to night in the factory and earn some money. But when all this land was privatized and they were thrown off the land and they were not allowed to hunt or fish or farm for their own food, then there was no choice. They had to sell themselves in order to feed their families. And that is how the labor market was created. Now we think of it as normal because but it is not a normal thing. It is a very cruel thing. So, for the capitalists, it is good for the laborers to be helpless. If you provide them with unemployment benefits and if you guarantee a minimum wage, that is harmful to the profits of the capitalists. And we saw that the share of the top 0.1% declined after the banking crisis when there were lots of regulations put on both, and also the Keynesian theory came into effect and was widely believed that it's the responsibility of the government. The free market will not create full employment, so it's the responsibility of the government to ensure that the laborers have jobs. And if they don't have jobs, then the government has to support them. Otherwise, if in the equilibrium theory, if somebody doesn't have a job, it's his own fault. He doesn't want to work. That's why he's unemployed. So this meta-argument, you see, this is something that you have to learn if you want to be contribute. You see, most of the people in the world are drugged into being observers. So in the cricket game, there are 13 people who are playing on the field and thousands of people who are watching. And you are all being trained to be watchers. But all of you can be players. You can actually go and change the world. But you are, for that you have to do meta thinking. Go beyond and okay, there's the world and there are thoughts, okay, here's economic theory. We just learn it. We don't ask questions about what this theory is. So meta thinking is one level higher. Why is this question being asked? Who is asking the question? What are his interests in this question? What if the answer is given in this way? Who will be benefited and who will be hurt? So the theory of free trade, for example, it says that actually, you see, if you once you start thinking at the higher level, and that is essential if you want to learn to think, then you see, if you look at the theory of free trade which you have been taught, it says that some groups will be hurt, some groups will be helped. Doesn't identify which groups will be helped, which groups will be hurt. So suppose that we have an agrarian economy and everybody is eating. Now we start exporting food and importing Mercedes. Who will be helped and who will be hurt? I think that the answer should be clear. Food will become more expensive because there is less food of it, and Mercedes will be helping some group of the population. Now, what does the trade theory say? Now, you see, the trade theory says that free trade is always beneficial. But the trade theory also says at the same time that some will be hurt and some will be helped. So now, suppose that somebody wants to argue that free trade should be done. Who is the person who is going to try to argue this? The Mercedes owners. They are going to be the ones who are going to. So how will they argue it? The argument is made that the value of what the gainers get is more than the value of what the losers lose. So then the argument made that, well, this is true only if you have compensation. That is okay, let the benefit be shared. The benefit that is being derived by the rich people should be shared with the poor people. In that case, you have something which is Pareto or superior. So the economists forget about this part, that okay, as long as it is possible for the gainers to compensate the losers, then you should do it. And we don't worry about whether the inequality increases or not. And it is this kind of politically based thinking which leads to the situation we see today, where 8 people have more money than 3.5 billion people at the bottom. And the economists say this is fine, there is no problem. Okay, so ever since 1930s Keynes, the Chicago school was trying to think of ways to attack Keynesian theory. And so one of the things that they did was done by Milton Friedman. He said that the Great Depression was not caused by the greed of the banks and the excess money that was created and the speculation. What was the cause of it? The cause was monetary mismanagement by government. Now, actually, this has been thoroughly disproven, but so Friedman's theory doesn't hold water. But Friedman was the one who got the Nobel Prize. The one who disproved his theory didn't get the Nobel Prize. Yes, well, this is common. You understand? You have to understand the meta theory. What is it that causes theories to become famous and well known, and what is it that causes other theories to be forgotten? So we've already seen this, that Ibn al-Haytham discovered the scientific method, but nobody knows it. The whole world says that it's Newton's laws, but these are all found in Ibn al-Haytham. So this is actually what is called power knowledge, and this is Michel Foucault has discovered it, and I have written about it, a small article. In my small articles I have tried to summarize the contents of heavy and difficult books which you cannot easily read. So if you read through them, you will get a lot of understanding of the world. So this power knowledge says that the knowledge that we have, actually the most important thing, what is power has some physical aspects, so these are the guns and the bombs, but more important is the knowledge aspect. We are enslaved not by the guns and the bombs, but by the wrong ideas that we have absorbed. And this is very important. So we can free ourselves by the ideas. The Prophet ﷺ, he created a world revolution by ideas, not by any physical, not by any industry, not by any chemistry, not by any weapons, just by ideas. And so today the same possibility exists. We can create a revolution by understanding Islam. Today we have been deceived into believing that the Western knowledge is the most important and most valuable. And so we seek after it. And we have been deceived into thinking that our ancient knowledge is useless. It has no value in modern society. And so we forget about the treasures that we have and we pursue these things which are of no value. And you can understand this. If you look at the knowledge that I am giving you, the things that I am teaching you are actually valuable in your personal life. If you think about what you have learned from KG to today and ask, is any of this going to be of any benefit to me in living my life? You will see that there is nothing. So a person can get matric and he can learn all of these things, and he will become a clerk or something, and he will never use any of the things that he studied. He will never use the mathematics, and he will never use the physics, and he will never use... So it's completely useless knowledge which is being taught in our schools. And it's not that there is no useful knowledge. There is a lot of useful knowledge, which if he had been taught, he could have learned how to be a better person, how to lead a better life. But because the meaning of knowledge has been corrupted, so we don't even seek the useful knowledge. So as Iqbal says, "Hum to mail bekaram hai, koi sahil hi nahi, raah dikhlaye kise reh rahe manzil hi nahi." Nobody is going to ask Allah Ta'ala for guidance because we don't think He has it. We think that the guidance is with the Western scholars. So, in relation to this article, basically what the Chicago school did was that they popularized these theories, basically the idea that the free market does not work is very damaging to the capitalists. You see, there's a basic, very simple thing. The capitalists say that let everyone be free. They don't say let us be free. Because when you say let everyone be free, it seems like it is a fair and equal and just thing. But now, what happens? I mean, the poor people, they don't have any choices. So basically, the freedom for the poor is freedom to sell himself into slavery. And the freedom for the capitalist is to buy whatever he wants, the whole planet or anybody, the poor people. So if you have regulations that no, you cannot buy the poor people, and you have taxation that people who have more than what they need, they should give to the people who have less than them. This is regulation, this is interference with the free market. So the capitalist does not want it. But more than that, you see, this is you have to learn meta thinking. It is not just that the capitalists have power. It is that the capitalist needs to deceive the poor people into thinking that this is the correct system. And so they deceive, you see, when the global financial crisis occurred. So it could have been solved easily and cheaply by basically there were people who were unable to make their mortgage payments because they had been sold mortgages by fraud. They didn't have any money and people sold their mortgage. So, but the crisis occurred because these mortgages payments are failing. Now, if the money had been given to those people who had the homes, then the economy would have survived. And this is what actually the finding of Atif Mia and Amir Sufi in House of Debt is. And the amount of money required to save the economy would have been very much less. But that was not allowed to happen. Instead, emergency package was bailed where $800 billion were given to banks, no questions asked. This was part of that. No questions asked. That we are not going to ask if they did something fraud, if they did something criminal. And so the same, much less money would have been enough to prevent the mortgage crisis if it had been given to the homeowners. So a campaign was put to prevent the public from thinking about this. Do you want to use your taxes to bail out somebody who has been irresponsible and he has taken a debt that he cannot pay? So everybody was told that you should not try to help. What about those bankers? No, that's fine to give our taxes to those criminal bankers who fooled these people into. So a massively wrong and harmful and damaging policy was carried out, but not by force, by deception, by creating the wrong knowledge. And the whole book of Mian Sufi is about the wrong types of knowledge that were spread in the world. So one piece of knowledge that was spread was that if we let the banking system collapse, then the whole world will go haywire. So he says that no, this is not true. It was possible to allow the banks to collapse, and it was possible for the government to ensure that the payments would be made. But everybody was scared that no, you have to let the banks, you have to make the banks survive whatever the cost, because otherwise the economy will collapse. So there is a huge amount of fraud knowledge that is going around. So in order to be either you are going to be a fool, just accept everything that is told to you because everybody says so it must be true. If it is being taught at Harvard, it must be true. So or you have to think for yourself. So there are many mechanisms which have been proposed by the free market economists to explain that how unemployment can occur without using Keynesian theory, so that the free markets are rescued. Basically, you see, I'm talking at the meta level. The effort is being made to rescue free markets by capitalists, because the capitalists want everybody to believe that free markets always work. So, widespread myth, everybody believes it. Governments are inefficient and corrupt, and private markets are great and wonderful. It's totally wrong. If you look at Enron, there's so much corruption, and actually if you look at the corruption of the multinational corporations, which runs into trillions of dollars, it is far more than if you take all of the corruption in all of the governments combined. Basically, the thing is that people are people. We have a certain level of honesty and integrity and certain level of dishonesty and corruption. And these are the same people that are in the government, same people are in the private sector. So the level of corruption in the government and the level of corruption in the private sector is the same. It depends on the honesty of the people. And if you want to increase integrity, then there are ways to do that, not the ones that you are being taught. Actually, it's very interesting again that the way to increase honesty, integrity, is not by catching the corrupt people, not by nab. It is the opposite. You have to build on strength. If there are 1,000 corrupt people and one honest person, if you can recognize and reward and appreciate the one honest person, then other 5 people will start to follow. And if other 5 people start to follow, then another 100 people will start to follow. Instead, if you start catching all of the poor corrupt people, suppose there are 1,000 honest people and 5 corrupt, and you catch all the corrupt, and then other people will say, oh, there are so many corrupt people, so I can also benefit. So when by catching and publicizing and recognizing corruption, you spread corruption. So yes, there is a balance. I mean, obviously, if you don't catch anybody, then there is a problem. But the main mechanism for creating honesty and integrity is reward and recognition and appreciation of honesty and integrity. And if we show movies with heroes, heroes will be produced. And actually, there's a concept of copycat crime. They showed a movie in the USA about how a prison break was made by helicopter landing in the middle of the prison and then going away. And just after that movie was shown, then there were a couple of crimes based on this plot. So if you start publicizing how people do bad things, people get ideas about how to do bad things. If you start publicizing things about how people do great things, people start doing great things. So basically what I am doing in this article in the first 4 parts is exactly what Keynes does in his chapter 2. He says he lists 4 mechanisms. He says these are the 4 ways in which classical theory can explain how there can be unemployment, and he looks at all of those factors and he rejects these factors do not work. As a consequence, there is no compatibility with the classical model and the observation. And once we arrive at that conclusion, then the result is that we must change the model. Unfortunately, this is because Keynes was a scientist, so he said, now the neoclassical economists, when they find that there is a difference between the consumer axioms and the consumer behavior, they just insult the consumer, but they don't change the model. They said the consumers are being irrational, but otherwise our theory is right. So this is the crucial difference. Science is based on observations. It starts by observing the world. It creates a theory which matches the reality. If there is a mismatch between theory and reality, then the theory is modified. And the modern economic theory which you have been taught follows none of these principles. Alright, so I think we'll stop here. And basically what I would like you to do next is to read the subsequent lectures, L9 and L10, and L8, L9 and 10, L8, 9 and 10 on Keynes. and we will take it from there next time. If you want, you can also read the remaining sections of this paper, but they are more technical and not directly related to the big picture which I am working on.